Imagine a man who's bought everything in his life, houses, headlines, silence, walking into the one room where his money can't buy him a different truth. The municipal courtroom in Providence didn't look like much: old wooden benches polished by generations of restless hands, the faint smell of floor wax and damp coats, a camera in the corner humming softly, catching every blink and sigh. People shuffled papers, cleared throats, whispered about parking tickets and overdue fines. Then the side door opened, and the murmur flattened into a low, curious hush. He stepped in like he owned the building. Gray at the temples, strong jaw, suit tailored so perfectly it almost didn't move when he did. Leonard Hale. Real estate baron, philanthropist on glossy brochures, the man whose name was on half the new buildings downtown. He took his place at the front with the same bored precision he might give a quarterly meeting. He didn't glance around to see who was watching. He assumed everyone was. Judge Caprio leafed through the file in front of him, glasses low on his nose. Next case. Leonard Hale, he read. Multiple violations for parking in a handicap zone, failure to respond to notices, accumulated penalties. On any other morning, it would have been routine. A fine, a lecture, a signature. Hale checked his watch, then lifted his head with faint irritation. "Let's make it quick," he said, loud enough for half the room to hear. "I control everyone in this city anyway." You could almost hear the oxygen leave the air. No one laughed. No one even coughed. A woman in the second row drew in a sharp breath. An older man in a worn jacket shook his head once, slowly, as if thinking, "There it is. There he is." Caprio didn't slam a gavel. He simply looked up. The warmth in his eyes cooled a few degrees, but his voice stayed calm. "Mr. Hale," he said, "in this courtroom, you control nothing. You answer." Hale shifted in his chair, not from fear, but annoyance at being challenged in public. He took out his phone, thumb flying over the screen as if to remind himself there were people waiting on him somewhere more important. For a second, the display angled toward the gallery. A few in the front row caught a glimpse, a text thread open, a familiar name at the top, one of the city officials often seen at ribbon cuttings beside him. Caprio noticed the phone, not the name. "Sir," he said, "you can put that away. You won't need help from it here." Reluctantly, Hale set the device face down, fingers still resting on it as though it were a lifeline. The clerk read out the list: 3 separate dates, same violation, same hospital lot. Photographs attached, time stamps, unpaid notices returned to sender. Nothing extraordinary, on paper. But there was something about the way Hale sat, the way he listened without really listening, that made the audience straighten in their seats. This wasn't a man surprised to be here. This was a man mildly offended that the process hadn't been handled quietly, somewhere else, with fewer witnesses. Caprio closed the file halfway, studying him. Around them, the benches creaked as people leaned forward just a little. "What you see on that paper," the judge said, almost to himself, "is a parking case." What everyone in the room felt, however, was something else entirely. The sense that, for the first time in a long time, Leonard Hale might have wandered into a place where his usual rules did not apply. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Judge Caprio let the silence settle before he spoke again, as if giving the room time to breathe. Then, gently but unmistakably firm, he asked the question that always revealed more than any file ever could. "Mr. Hale, tell me a little about yourself." It was a simple request. But coming from Caprio, it carried weight, an invitation and a test. Hale gave a short laugh, the kind that didn't touch his eyes. "Judge, you know who I am. Everyone here does." He spread his hands in a gesture meant to be casual, but his shoulders were too rigid for it. "My background is public record. I built half the waterfront. I've provided more jobs than any politician in this state." People in the gallery shifted, some with skepticism, some with weary recognition. Caprio didn't react. He simply waited. Hale exhaled through his nose, irritated by the pause. Fine, he said. I grew up in Cranston. My father was a firefighter. Old school man. Woke up early, worked hard. Thought fairness was some kind of religion. He said it with a faint smirk, but then something in his jaw tightened, betraying a flicker of memory he hadn't meant to show. My mother worked nights at a mill, he continued, eyes fixed somewhere over the judge's shoulder. We had nothing. Second-hand clothes, overdue bills, the works. I swore I'd never live like that. That part, at least, was honest. The room could feel it. But I learned something early, Hale added, voice sharpening. Power makes things simpler. When you have it, people listen. When you don't, you wait in line and hope someone notices you. A murmur rippled through the benches, uncomfortable, disapproving, but also strangely reflective for some who'd lived through Rhode Island's rougher decades. Caprio folded his hands. You speak of power as if it excuses behavior. It explains it, Hale corrected. And in business, explanation is enough. The judge's brows lifted slightly, an almost invisible sign of concern. You mentioned earlier, he said, that you controlled the situation with your car. But now you're suggesting, someone else might have been driving? Hale blinked. What? No. I said. You said, I didn't park there. Then you said, let's get this over with. Those two statements don't align. For the first time, Hale hesitated. His eyes dropped to the face-down phone beside him, as though its black screen might offer a script. The gallery caught it. A woman in the back muttered, he's slipping. Caprio gently pressed forward. Mr. Hale, were you behind the wheel on each of those dates? A tight swallow. A pause half a beat too long. I don't recall the details, Hale said slowly. My schedule is complicated. The judge nodded once, an acknowledgement, not approval. And what about the accident in 2016, he asked softly, flipping a page in the file. The one your attorneys settled out of court. That landed like a dropped brick. Hale's posture stiffened, the composure he'd worn like armor cracked in the corners. That has nothing to do with today, he said, sharper than he intended. Caprio's voice stayed level. Patterns matter, Mr. Hale. They tell us whether what we're seeing is an exception, or something else. The audience didn't move. Not a shuffle, not a cough. Just the electric stillness of people sensing a much larger story beginning to surface. Hale tried to recover, leaning back in his chair. Look, fairness, real fairness, is defined by those who can afford to make things right. The judge closed the file completely now, hands resting over it. And that, Caprio said quietly, is exactly why we're going to look very closely at what you've said, and what you haven't. For the first time, Leonard Hale looked unsettled. And the room, every last person in it, felt the shift. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly, studying Hale as one might study a painting that seemed to change depending on the angle. His voice, when it came, was calm, too calm. Mr. Hale, let's revisit the dates of the violations. The clerk handed over the file. The judge opened it with deliberate slowness, turning the pages as though he expected something to leap out. The first two citations are ordinary, Caprio said. Wrong place, wrong time. Straightforward. Hale nodded, trying to reclaim confidence. Exactly. Nothing unusual. But the third one, the judge tapped the corner of the page. 47 minutes parked in a handicapped zone outside Memorial Hospital. Yet hospital entry logs show no one by your name entering the building. A rustle moved through the room. Hale's jaw flexed. That's clearly a clerical error. Caprio didn't respond. He simply looked at him, long enough that Hale began tapping one finger on the table. The judge continued, hospital surveillance shows your car arriving, but the driver exits toward the street, not toward the hospital. A quick intake of breath came from somewhere in the gallery. Hale's mouth tightened. I must have been getting coffee. Caprio finished gently. Hale froze. Yes, the judge went on, because the camera across Elm Street shows someone matching your build walking into a cafe at the exact time you claim you were taking your daughter to an appointment. The billionaire's confidence faltered, a faint flush appeared under the tan he maintained so carefully. Caprio turned slightly toward the officer who'd issued the ticket. "Officer Daniels, you noted a complaint from a bystander that day?" Daniels nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. Caller said a man in an expensive car used a police-affiliated permit to take a disabled spot. Caller didn't want to leave his name but sounded frustrated. Said it wasn't the first time." That hit the room like a low thunder roll. Hale's hand moved toward his phone, hesitated, and pulled back. Everyone noticed. Caprio returned his attention to him. "You mentioned earlier that someone else may have driven the car. I want to clarify that." "I didn't say that," Hale snapped too quickly. "You implied it." Hale opened his mouth, closed it again. A woman in the second row whispered, "He's losing track of his own story." The judge flipped another page. "This vehicle is registered under the Veteran Support Initiative. A charitable foundation you oversee. Why would a foundation-owned vehicle receive reduced fines instead of standard penalties?" Hale tried a smile, but it looked brittle. "Donations, Your Honor. Goodwill. A misunderstanding. These things happen." Yet, Caprio said softly, the reductions were processed by municipal employees who normally work nowhere near traffic enforcement. Now the room leaned in. "And what's more," Caprio added, "those reductions occurred only on your violations. Not another foundation driver's. Just yours." That landed harder than any accusation. Hale's composure finally cracked. Those adjustments, were handled by staff. "I don't micromanage every little." "Every little?" Caprio repeated. The echo hung between them. Then came the moment no one expected. The judge looked at the date of the third violation again. His tone changed, quiet, waited. "Mr. Hale, the man who filed that anonymous complaint returned this morning. He's in the hallway. He says he wants to speak." Hale's reaction was instantaneous, his shoulders stiffened, eyes darting to the entrance of the courtroom. For the first time all morning, genuine fear flashed across his face. The room went utterly still. Whatever story Hale thought he was controlling, he had just lost it. The courtroom was still humming from the inconsistencies in Hale's story when Judge Caprio lifted a hand, a small gesture, but it quieted the room instantly. "Before I proceed," he said, "there is someone who asked to speak." A soft creak echoed as the door opened. A man stepped inside, 60-something, modest jacket, careful steps, the kind of person no one notices until they start talking. He clutched a folder thick with papers. The shift in the air was immediate. Even Hale, who until now looked untouchable, straightened sharply. The judge nodded. "Sir, please state your name." "Thomas Avery," the man said. "I worked for Mr. Hale. I was his accountant for 23 years. No murmurs. No gasps. Just stillness, the heavy kind, when everyone feels a truth approaching. Avery opened his folder with hands that trembled only slightly. The Veteran Support Initiative, the organization that owns the vehicle in question, was never designed to serve veterans. It was a holding company. A buffer. A tool to move liabilities off Mr. Hale's books. Hale shot to his feet. "You don't know what you're talking about." Avery didn't flinch. "I signed what he asked for years. Until I couldn't sign anymore." A low, instinctive exhale swept through the gallery. "You're a disgruntled employee," Hale snapped. "This is pathetic." But his voice cracked, just enough to betray a fracture. Avery's gaze stayed steady. "In 2016, when that internal investigation started, he ordered us to erase the footage from the security server. He said, no one will ever ask the right questions." This time the reaction was audible, an uneven ripple of shock. Hale pounded his palm on the table. You think this changes anything? I control everyone. The words landed like a detonator. People didn't gasp, they froze, absorbing the raw arrogance, the naked belief that power erased consequences. Some stared at Hale as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Caprio didn't raise his voice. His calm itself became a force. Not here, he said quietly. Not today. Hale's breathing sharpened. The mask he'd worn since stepping into the courtroom was slipping, anger sharpening into panic, panic hardening into something desperate. Avery closed the folder, as though each page inside carried years of held breath. I didn't come to destroy him, he said quietly. I came because someone has to finally say what we all saw happening. The judge regarded him with a slow nod, then looked back at Hale, almost with sadness, not judgment. This court, Caprio said, cannot fix the past. But we will face the truth. Hale didn't sit. He simply stood there, rigid, breathing shallowly, no longer the man who claimed he controlled the city. For the first time, he looked like someone who understood he was no longer in command of anything, not even himself. Judge Caprio took the packet from Avery with both hands, as if its weight required steadiness. He didn't open it immediately. He let the silence settle, let the tension breathe, and only then unfolded the first page. Mr. Hale, he said softly, these documents will help us understand the extent of your involvement. He began to read. Not dramatic crimes. No sensational headlines. Just the quiet, methodical patterns that cut deepest for an older American audience, shifting tax burdens, routing assets through temporary charitable entities, registering vehicles under programs meant for veterans. A slow erosion of public trust, hidden behind polished press releases. A murmur broke in the gallery when the judge held up a handwritten note, crooked letters, rushed ink. Signed by you, Caprio said. Yet earlier you stated you never handled operational matters. Hale's jaw tightened. He stared at the floor, not speaking. Another page. This one typed, stamped, and dated. Caprio read aloud, instruct accounting to file the fleet vehicle under the Veterans Auxiliary. This protects us if anything goes wrong. A woman in the back row exhaled so sharply it echoed. Then Officer Mills, who had been standing near the wall, arms folded, stepped forward. Your Honor, he said, I wasn't sure I should mention this earlier, but the night I wrote Mr. Hale that ticket, he approached me in the parking lot. The room quieted to a painful stillness. He told me he appreciated my loyalty and put an envelope on my passenger seat. I left it there until my shift ended. Inside were $2,000. Hale finally reacted, snapped his head up, eyes wide, a flicker of something close to fear. That never happened. Mills didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I filed an internal memo. Didn't want trouble. But I won't lie in this courtroom. The judge pressed his palms together, absorbing the moment. Mr. Hale, bribing an officer, whether successful or not, is a serious allegation. Hale opened his mouth, then closed it. Words refused to come. The man who once boasted of control now appeared hollow, caught inside a shrinking perimeter of his own making. Caprio returned to the documents. This court is not here to adjudicate your corporate affairs, he said with deliberate calm. But your behavior, your choices, are woven through every page. Another sheet surfaced, an email printed in grayscale. A directive reading, delay responses to city notices. We'll handle the tickets quarterly. Efficient. Cold. Calculated irresponsibility. The judge folded the packet, aligning each corner with care, as if to underline the gravity of what it contained. Hale, he said, this isn't about one car in one parking space. It's about a pattern. A thread that began long before today. In the gallery, no one stirred. Even breathing seemed quieter. For the first time all morning, Hale's shoulders sagged, not theatrically, not for sympathy. But as though the scaffolding that held him upright had finally collapsed under the weight of truth. Caprio leaned forward just slightly. "I now see the entire picture," he said. "And the picture demands a response." And with that, the room braced itself, because everyone knew the moment of reckoning was about to arrive. For a long moment, Judge Caprio didn't speak. He let the air in the courtroom settle into something almost sacred, an echoing quiet that made every person sit straighter, breathe slower. When he finally lifted his eyes to Hale, his tone held neither triumph nor anger. "Only truth. Mr. Hale," he said, "you've spent years believing that power protects you. That influence is a shield. But real power is the courage to own your choices." Hale blinked, as if the words cut deeper than the accusations ever could. His voice, when it came, was unsteady. "I didn't think any of this mattered. The tickets, the names, the paperwork. It all felt small." Caprio leaned forward slightly. "Small things shape who we are." A ripple of emotion passed through the gallery, older men and women, veterans, retirees who had lived long enough to see this truth play out in their own lives. The judge folded his hands. "I'm going to issue my ruling." The room tightened. "I will impose the full financial penalty, every dollar owed, without deferral, without reduction. No gasps. Just a collective absorbing of consequences." "But," Caprio continued, "this court is not only a place of punishment. It is a place where we ask people to become better than their past." A few heads nodded slowly. "So, in addition to the fines, you will complete 200 hours of community service at the Veteran Support Center here in Providence. You will listen to their stories. You will help them. You will understand the people your foundation was supposed to serve." Hale stared at him, shock mixing with something more fragile, humility. "And one more thing," Caprio said. "You will apologize publicly. Not to this court. To Officer Mills. And to Mr. Avery, who had the courage to tell the truth when it cost him dearly." The murmuring started, surprise, disbelief, even approval. One man in the second row whispered, "That's justice." Hale swallowed hard. "I will do it," he said quietly. No threat. No bravado. Just the words of a man who finally understood he was not above the world he lived in. Avery, the retired accountant, stood in the back, arms folded. He didn't smile, but his voice was soft. "He wasn't always like this. Maybe he can find his way back." The judge nodded once, acknowledging the sentiment. Then Caprio rose, a gesture that silenced the room even further. "We cannot control the whole world," he said, "but we can always control the kind of people we choose to be." The line landed with the force of scripture. Some in the gallery blinked away tears, others bowed their heads, letting the words settle in. Hale didn't move at first. He just breathed, slow, uneven, as though relearning something he had forgotten decades ago. Then, with a quiet resolve, he approached Officer Mills. The entire room held its breath as the man who once claimed he controlled everyone extended a hand. "I'm sorry," Hale said. And for once, it sounded real. Mills shook his hand. A soft applause rose, not loud, not triumphant, but grateful. A recognition that something rare had happened here, a powerful man choosing responsibility over pride. Hale stepped toward the exit, shoulders no longer squared in arrogance but carried with the weight, and possibility, of change. And in that small municipal courtroom, justice didn't just punish. It redeemed.